steps in. Sometimes people will be like, well, they haven't answered the query and it's been a week. And I'll be like, that's great. I assume it's going to be longer than that. It's going to actually be more like 4 to 6 weeks. I personally will try to answer queries in a few weeks, sometimes the same week, because I kind of have an obsessive compulsive habit of trying to keep my inbox under 25. Right now, Laura at the agency has 350 unread emails in her inbox, and Amanda has over 700 unread emails right now. So there you go. Those are 4 to 6 week waiters. That's you just pitching your idea. That's not even like requesting materials. And then the reason we're all behind is because we're traveling. So we do a lot of we go to conferences in the spring, summer, and fall. So once we start traveling, we fall behind. So I just like the idea about the Beatles band. I've been wanting to read that for 2 weeks. I've had no time to read it. So it's in my possession. I'm excited about it. I would have liked to read it yesterday. Still no time. But 4 to 6 weeks beyond that is what we're going to read, sometimes 8, after we request your materials. So sometimes people go, well, I queried this agent 6 weeks ago and I didn't hear from them. Well, go look at their website. Some agents that I'm friends with, if they don't answer you at all, no response is their answer. Others will say, we're just behind. We will try to answer it. Or, if you did send the materials and 6 weeks have passed, just a hint, if you get on Twitter, that'll give you an idea if something major happened to us. So sometimes real things happen. It's called real life situations. So you can definitely check in at 6 weeks, but also you can do a little research online through social media if something major's going on. I like partials. That's where I read 50 pages. And if I think it's working, I request more. So then you have to wait longer, unfortunately. Some people do fulls, and fulls take a long time. So right now, I know Amanda said she had a few hundred full manuscripts to read. And she reads science fiction, so there you go. Those are pretty heavy books. So then you get those rejections. Type A Don would encourage you to have a spreadsheet and track what you're doing. So you should just create a spreadsheet that says name of the people you queried, where they're at, when you sent a query letter, and when you got a response. If you didn't get a response, that'll kind of help you figure out if you want to follow up or not. And when you do get a response, have a column as to what they said. So if you see a sea of rejections that are all very generic in tone, you can just tell they didn't really give you any clue as to why they turned it down. And you see a lot of those, that means that maybe your pitch needs to be fine-tuned a little bit. But at the same time, that can be an education because you might you might need to redo your pitch. Maybe you're not selling your book the best you can. So basically, as I say, brace yourself, rejections are on the way. As an agent, what I do is, we get rejections too, by the way, just so you know, right? So I just finally sold a book that I've been taking out for 1.5 years because I love that book so much. 1.5 years. And it was just the perfect timing because an editor that I worked with at one house moved to another house. So she was acquiring an entirely new list. And we were about to shelve this book. We were just to the point where it was I think we've been taking out 1.5 years straight. We're about to be done. And I think we had been to 40 editors, at least 40. And this editor friend of mine saw it, and within a week, she's like, this is great. And she made an offer, and my author was like, are you serious? I actually have an offer? I'm like, yeah. So it really wasn't the pitch, and it wasn't her idea. It was just finding the right editor, because all our rejections were very, you could see they liked it, but they just, they didn't love it enough to make an offer. And when you get a rejection, there's no need to say thank you. It's nice of you. That's something, I'm a thank you note person myself. But we understand. It's just, you kind of save it and put it aside. But, we assume that we'll move on. It's just a lot of emails, that's all. And then never take it personally. If you feel like that generic rejection is a personal jab at you, it's not. It just means the idea didn't really connect necessarily. So just, kind of put it in the reserves as to why, that response, and then look at that. You will see a trend. So if I'm taking out a novel for children, and they say it's not engaging enough, or they need this, and this, and we see that a few times, I actually will stop taking it out until we fix it. So we will, we'll do another edit of the book. We'll adjust the storyline, whatever we have to do. And this is the book the guy was telling you about, Mike Napa. This is the book. I highly recommend you just own it. It's a good book to own for your library. It's 77 Reasons Why Your Book Was Rejected. So as you receive these query letters, and you should make it a game and see where it's going. He actually has a lot of these common responses, and he gives you some, hopefully, a handful of solutions as to how to fix your pitch, basically, or your idea. And this is a great way to see if there's a pattern emerging as to why people are saying no all the time. Like a common thing that happens with young adult stuff is that they'll say, it'll be an adult novel, but the main character is 14. So it'll have adult tones, character's 14, and they assume it's young adult. And I'll be like, no. And I always give examples. There's Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird. There's Bastard Out of Carolina. There's a lot of books with young adults, but they're not in the young adult section. They're in the adult section. Things to avoid, the don't do it's. This is a query letter. I did not write it. Just a quick glance if you can see it. What is wrong with this query letter? It's a dark humor action mystery adventure in 29 chapters plus epilogue, roughly 102,000 words. Even if this was good, this makes me cringe a little bit internally. Like we got some problems here. Other things worth noting, he's a first-time novelist. That's cool. I don't mind debut novelists. But then he basically has been working in the gift industry magazines, and he basically feels that he's qualified to write a novel, even though he writes in the gift industry. That doesn't help me, and it's kind of frightening how much, you'll see the example later on, but this is not working. Let's just put it that way. This is bad, but this is not working either. The next one is what we would call someone who's a creeper in the nicest way. It's someone who has written a stream of thought query letter, and it just goes on and on and on and on. Things that he doesn't mention the title, and he tells a story that makes me just very worried about his sanity very quickly. But then on top of that, he says it's part comedy, part paranormal, thriller, urban fantasy. Once again, choose a category and stay with it. What is wrong with this one? That is the query letter right there. He's like, I have a hard-hitting, penetrating, riveting, intriguing, thought-provoking page-turner of a book, and that I didn't respond to. What is wrong with this one? There's no query. Not even that. This is the 2-line. This is 2. So have you ever done a mass email? Don't do that. You need to personalize your letter. This one I actually tried. They had it says middle grade fantasy. Google's gone strong. That's fine. And they have a log line. 12-year-old Calypso Blue is no orphan, but she might as well be. So they got a log line. This almost worked until I realized it's an upper middle grade fantasy of 82,000 words. So I wrote her back and I said, you realize upper middle grade is 45K. You got 2 books here. So. Things like this, like even you could tell she really worked on it, but she didn't know where her book was shelved. So you can't have a 12-year-old protagonist in a middle grade novel at 82,000 words. That's 2 books. Once again, you can't see the small print, but there's a lot of agents in here, all copied. And it says they have an introduction to their query letter, and they have all these PSSS, and then they attach their query letters. Once again, I'm all about not getting viruses on my computer. This person just gets what we call not PC very quickly, un-PC. And they go on and on about why they're not GLBT, and then that basically they're going to write this book about the GLBT community, and it goes on and on and on and on. So you don't want to be inappropriate in your query letters either. Because one of the things that I'm looking at is I'm looking at you, your idea, and also I'm going to see how you engage the public. I don't want to bring an author to a publishing house that's going to be a PR nightmare. That means it reflects on our agency and also will affect the author's book sales, and it means the publisher gets really upset with me. So I'm kind of the filter by which they hopefully have low drama or little at all, okay? So we're going to move on to the next thing. And if you need to use the bathroom, you do it. So I want to kind of speed through this, and you'll get copies later because I want to have fun with marketing. So I've talked all about the query letter. Now we're going to step back a little bit. This book proposal that I'm proposing to you is you don't have to have it ready for fiction ahead of time, but for our novelists that we work with, we do a small book proposal before we take it out. But if it's nonfiction, I need a book proposal. Memoir, you're in a weird place. You have to do a book proposal and finish the book. It's not, you're in the gray space. A lot of people will say, I've written this great book, why should I do a book proposal? Well, the thing is that there's the creative side of publishing, which I respect and I revere, but I have to also look at the business of publishing. And when I look at your book proposal, you're giving me a feeling that you understand the business that we operate in, and that you actually are ready to step into the game. That I'm hoping you know the business of publishing. This is my goal. So this is what most people tell me. I already have too much work to do. Like, I'm already working on my book. But here's my theory, because I love cartoons, is there's this cartoon called Pinky and the Brain. And every day they go, what are we going to do today, Brain? He's like, of course we're going to take over the world. And that is what you have to do with your book proposal. Come up with a plan to take over the world, okay? You need to have a plan. So I'm going to give you the blueprint for doing that. This is going to make your head hurt, so I'm just not going to sugarcoat it. I will do the best I can in the time I have. So mine is like, achieve the goals. You can do this. So the things I'm going to be looking for, and this has already been emphasized before, why did you write your book? I'm going to ask you that. You can show that off in your book proposal. Some of those query letters I showed you actually had reasons why people wrote their book. Like the guy with World of Warcraft, he participated in it, so he felt the need to write that book. I talked about your bio already, but if you write on a regular basis, that's really, I want to see that reflected in how your proposal is written, but also your bio. And then another thing too is I want to make sure that others have read your writing. There's some like myth that if you share your writing with other writers, they'll steal it, and everyone's going to steal your idea. Let me tell you that everybody has very similar ideas. After Harry Potter got popular, every single middle grade novel had an orphan going to a private school who's lost a parent who finds they have a magical power. Does this really affect my ability to like it? No, just tell me a good story. And then, of course, are you ready for the competition? If you do not develop what one of my writer friends says is rhino skin, you will not be able to handle it. So this is what we call thick skin. So when you do the proposal, this is a good way to confirm if your book idea is ready or not. So my author, Jessica, she actually tells me she does book proposals before she outlines her book ideas, which is an interesting way to go about it. So it even comes down to how much money someone has, as well as how good your book is. So if they can only buy one book, why would they buy your book? Why would they want to reach out and read your book? So you have to think about what makes your book stand out in the marketplace, whether it's the category, the writing, or whatever, because people do have limited funds. So we have to make sure that if they're going to spend $20 on your book, why would they want to buy your book? So you would mention books that are similar to yours. You would also mention how yours is different from them, but this is my hint that you keep it professional and positive, and you say, yeah, this book is different than mine, because it talks about monkeys playing guitar instead of banjo, but you don't get negative about it. And then, of course, how your book will stand out in the marketplace. And then your readership, which we'll go on and on about, but if you've been published online, I want to know about it. Do you have a website? Do you have a blog? If you at least just have a website that has your face on it and your bio and a little bit about yourself, I'm a happy girl. It doesn't have to be over the top. Now, some people like me will will put blog posts up and things like that, but you don't have to do that. Just at least have an author page. And then, are you an expert? So for nonfiction, you really have to be an expert. So one of my early books I sold was a biography of Betty Crocker, and as we're all in Minnesota, we know that was not a real person. So Susan was considered the expert on all things Betty Crocker per General Mills. That was a good selling point because she had access to archives that nobody else had access to. So just to give you the list, so you both know we talked about the query letter, so everything. For fiction, you need the entire manuscript to be ready, and memoir as well. The entire manuscript has got to be ready. But for nonfiction, we sell it by book proposal. So that means I just need 3 sample chapters. So if you've written a cookbook or whatever nonfiction book it is, 2 to 3 sample chapters will be more than enough. If you have writing samples, those are great too, from publications. We're going to cover all these sections just so I'll go in the order here. But for fiction, I like a short synopsis. This is your elevator pitch, as I call it, 2 to 3 paragraphs that talk about your book. This is a short synopsis. You should also write a long synopsis too. A long one is where you list all the characters, the actions, and all that. That's for fiction. For nonfiction, we call it an overview because you haven't actually written the book yet. This is where you talk about what the book will accomplish when it is written. And then, of course, the next section is always your bio. Tell me about yourself. So you basically, we'll talk about that section, but you can use your author bio that you write here for your bio in your query letter. So saves you some time. And then, of course, the market, that's the who. That's the segment of people who will read your book. Market, not marketing, but market. Who will read your book? And usually I break it down into 3 groups. So we'll do an exercise for that. And then competition, which I mentioned, just find some books of similar nature. And then promotion. This is how people will learn about your book after it comes out. So this is where you brainstorm. This is a great marketing plan. You say, when my book comes out, I'm going to get on Carrie Miller's radio show, and I'm going to also try to get on Twin Cities Live, and I'm going to do this, this, and this, and I'm going to try to, submit my stories to HuffPo or whatever. You have to brainstorm. Are you promising to do these things? No. You're just talking about great ways to share the word about your book coming out into the world. One of the things that nonfiction does is we do have chapter summaries at the end, and that's because the book is not written yet. Right now I have a book that's going to editorial board next week, and it's a book on urban magic. So she had to write like a 16-chapter summary of everything she'll do. So it's because the book is not obviously written yet. So she did one sample chapter for me. So that's your blueprint. We're going to so this is the overview. It's 1 to 2 pages, and I'm going to emphasize this double-spaced. For fiction, I mentioned the 1 to 5 pages. That would be your long synopsis, or you could call it the full synopsis, but do a short synopsis just for the hell of it, and that's 2 to 3 paragraphs. You could have a short synopsis and a full synopsis. And then this is where you talk about who, what, where, why. Like, who are you? What is your book about? Where will the story go, especially with fiction, and why should we be interested in it? My goal when I read that is to get an idea of what your book is about without having actually read your book. The reason I like a short synopsis is because I don't want you to tell me the ending if it's a novel. So I generally will, if the short synopsis is working, I'll read your book and basically later on look at your full synopsis to make sure that I followed the story correctly, that I came away with the same story. And this is where I encourage you to have a short synopsis no matter what. So I really get annoyed if I'm seeing, Jane went to the store and she ran into her ex-boyfriend, and then her ex-boyfriend tells her that this happened. Where you're just kind of like, it's all the actions are happening, and I don't need to see all that when I'm just trying to get an idea of what the story is about. So that's why I like a short one versus a full. But basically, this was our nonfiction overview, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 paragraphs. And this was 2 pages, double-spaced. So we talked about how World of Warcraft has 100 million people playing it. And then we talk about how their lives have changed as a result of World of Warcraft. And basically this says why we should be interested, and basically why there's a market for this and what this book promises to accomplish. So it says 10 years in Orc will illuminate a unique moment in time, technology, and culture. So this is what we're promising to do. If you keep it that short and concise, I can look at this and then request your chapters and actually read the real book. This was not hard to sell because the editor took this into a meeting and just read it to the publisher. Because at the editorial meetings, what they do is they have the publisher of the house, They have other editors. They have the sales and marketing departments. And then the editor who wants it will pitch it to the whole group and say, I want to work on this book. What do you think about it? And there will be a debate and a lot of discussion. And if they can convince them that it's good, then they can make an offer to the author to buy that book and publish it. So this is how they do it. They take this into the meeting room. So for fiction, it's a little bit longer, like I told you. And this is a young adult novel I just sold. And so this is as you can see, it's pretty short and sweet on every section, but it talks about a young adult. Her dad's an ambassador, and basically she's been hanging out with her dad in other countries, getting homeschooled. And then something happens where she basically gets recognized by the State Department, and they send her to a private school to keep an eye on a girl whose safety is at risk, who basically has been evading protection. So she's going to be a spy, basically, or an agent, a secret agent for a little while. So this talks about the short summary, and I'm not going to make you read it all, but that was 3 pages. So this one we had no problem selling either, because I didn't give it all away. The ending is not given away. Please don't tell me the ending. So the next section is your bio. 1 page. Can you summarize your writing career in 1 page? Double space it. You should throw your picture in there too if you feel so inclined. I like to see pictures. Or you can, like a professional picture, of course. When we package our proposals, we do put like a photo of the author, the kind of photo that would go on the back of a book. And just so you know, like the overview, that's usually the back copy on a book. They've literally taken the back copy from our proposals with our fiction and nonfiction and cut and paste it to the back of books. And they'll just shorten it a little bit, but it's basically everything we had in our section. And then they'll take our bio that we have here, and they'll cut and paste it to the back of the book and into the marketing materials. It's crazy how much basically production will just lift it and move it over when you do it for them. So definitely, I want to get an idea of who you are, but keep it professional. So some of the things we're going to ask you is, who are you? So mention your name, mention your creds. You're going to see a lot of repetition here, by the way. Your publishing connections, so you're part of this organization, so mention it. That's something to be proud of. And then things to not mention is your personal life, your number of children's pets, favorite foods. I've heard it all. Your goals, your dreams, your delusions. So I often feel that your bio should very much reflect what your book idea is about without me even having to mention the book idea. The next section that you would have is the market. That's who will read your book. This is the who. It's 2 to 4 pages. So I don't have a chart, I don't have a screen to write on. So one thing I like to do is I do a thing called Venn diagramming. What I like to do is name 3 groups that basically would be interested in a book. And inevitably, there will be some overlap by which you have your perfect audience. So we're going to use an easy one. Name 3 groups of people that read Twilight. Teens. Okay, what else? Huh? I heard another one. Mothers, or women. Who else? Who else read Twilight? We'll say fans of vampires. So there are teens who like vampires. There are women who like vampires. There are women who like reading teen books. And really, the perfect book is women in general love vampire paranormal novels, right? Sometimes you have 4 or 5 circles overlapping. But if you don't know what who your audience is, do a Venn diagram. Think about all the themes in your book. Think about where you want to go. But when I'm pitching an idea and where I want to take it, I do a lot of diagramming on just kind of start noting things. Or if I'm considering an idea, I do a lot of diagramming on paper. Sometimes it's nice to step back from the words and just kind of look at it in more of like a pattern. That gets to our section. Who are your readers? Sometimes it's a lot of crossover. And then sometimes you have to think about occasions. So you might have a book that's specific to occasions. So, I mentioned Choose Your Own Misery, The Office Adventure. Well, the next book they're doing is coming out in October is Choose Your Own Misery, The Holidays. It's about a Christmas that goes wrong, essentially. So it's a good holiday kind of book. That's a book we'll just see come out every holiday. It's not necessarily going to be read year round, and that's all right. We can embrace that. Sometimes they're really popular topics. So for a while there's tons of movies about like young teenage girls like saving the world, right? We had Divergent, we had Hunger Games, we had tons of these books coming out. And so you might find that there might be a trend in writing, and I would say don't write to a trend, but if you have a really good idea and you're a good writer and you've told a good story, it might be about vampires or whatever, but if it's a good enough story, we can look past the fact that that is a trend. You can keep it pretty simple. Like obviously this, My Feet Are Beautiful was a young adult novel, so we had our opening, but obviously our most evident group of readers would be young adults, because that's the intended readership is young adults. So we talked about that. Then we talked about crossover appeal. So one of the reasons I love this book is it reminded me of Eleanor and Park, which was one of my favorite books from a few years ago. Eleanor and Park was just this lovely, lovely young adult novel. It's actually set in North Dakota, I think in Fargo. I think it's set in Fargo. But it's just a beautiful, beautiful book. And so I wanted my own Eleanor and Park kind of book, and this was it. And then, of course, Eleanor and Park was well received by regular readers as well as teachers and librarians. So for Christina's book, we basically were like, oh yeah, if they liked Eleanor and Park, then I bet educators and librarians will like it too. And let me tell you, as someone who has a master's in library and information sciences, you need to be really good friends with your librarian. I'm just saying, if you are a writer, you should be supporting your library through like donations and participating, but also if a librarian likes your book, it will go far. It's same with teachers. Librarians really paved the way in children's book publishing, and librarians they have a good eye for a good book. So definitely get to know your librarians. This leads to the next section, your competition. So competition is basically where I told you, figuring out what's similar. One of the things about bookstores is there's a meaning behind the madness and how it's laid out. I can tell you that I can walk into a bookstore and just based on the number of shelves and where everything is, I can tell you how well they're doing on sales. There's a science to it. So what you want to do is go into the bookstore and just walk around the bookstore and figure out where you think your book belongs. Is there something that inspired you to write the book that you did? Maybe you need to go to that section. Are people, if you've had beta readers, these are people who've read your book while it's going through several drafts. Have they mentioned that it reminds them of certain books? Go to those sections and really figure out why where your book belongs. Sometimes it's maybe a different topic, but it's similar in scope. So like one of my favorite pop culture writers is Mary Roach. She is a really fun writer. So she'll choose a nonfiction topic and then she circles around it and explores that topic from different angles. So her first book was Stiff, and it's the Dangerous Lives of Cadavers. So basically the lives of cadavers. So it sounds morbid, but it's a fascinating book. So she talks about, some of them are car test dummies. She talks about Egypt. She talks about the medical field and all these other things. It's really scientific in scope. And so the way that she discusses that idea makes it really interesting. And so anytime someone is doing, like even if they're not writing about what she's writing about, if it's a narrative similar to Mary Roach, then I say you should mention that. And also this is where you talk about how your book will be better, similar, or different. And last but not least, make sure the bibliographic information is there. So you'll mention books with similar content maybe, books in the same category. So I talked about Mike Nappa's, where you go to the section and you pull some books off the shelf and see what they've done. Those books are competition. Maybe it's format. I don't know if you ever, there's all these gorgeous coffee table books. Like there was one called Awkward Family Photos a few years ago, which was hysterical. And it started out as a Tumblr blog where people posted really awkward family photos. They were just the really embarrassing images. So you would, like if your book was one of those, like if it's something very image driven, you would mention books that would be similar in that presentation. Also books that would, like people that like this book might like this. So just a little hint, if you go on Amazon.com and you browse for a topic, because they love to collect your data against your will, if you're searching on there, like I'm looking for books on horses and you're just kind of digging through, or if you bought a book, they'll say, others, It'll be at the bottom. People who have looked at this have looked at this, and it's all across the bottom. So this is free research for you right there that Amazon is doing. So always make sure to mention the name of the publisher and the date of publication. So the rule of thumb, some agents and editors are hardcore. It can't be more than 5 years old. I'm a little more patient here. I give it about 10 years. And if you say that something is competition that is clearly a New York Times bestseller, and you have not reached the levels of popularity like that New York Times bestseller, you can say that you were inspired by them, but don't list them as competition. List some other stuff too. Things that are a little more not New York Times bestseller-ish. You do need to recognize the elephant in the room, but you don't have to compare yourself to the elephant. Let's put it that way. And then, of course, always keep it positive. If I see you getting really negative quickly, it's not good. I mean, just think if I want to take it to that house. If you've said, this is the worst book ever, you got to just have some tact there. Keep it tactful. So I like to give examples. This is what we do. I like images in my book proposals. So you always have an opening. That's 2 to 4 sentences. Say this is where you recognize there's competition. This is what they're going to do, blah, blah, blah. And then you start talking about, so this is the World of Warcraft one. Obviously, because I have a Dungeons and Dragon dice book here, right? But this is of Dice and Men. So we have the title and the year and the author and a big summary here. One thing you can do is just go to Amazon.com, look up the book that's competition, cut and paste that into your proposal and kind of paraphrase. You can say, this is what Amazon says. My book will be different because it did this or it's doing this. So you're allowed to use that summary to kind of help you figure out how you're going to present that. I just put in quotation marks if I'm going. I don't want to be a plagiarizer, so I always give credit where it's due. And then, of course, we went on. We had Fantasy Freaks and Gaming Geeks. There you go. We had Super Mario. This was not hard at all. So if you see a trend here, all we did was choose gaming books. There were no books on World of Warcraft that we wanted to mention. In fact, there was a World of Warcraft book we did not mention, and it was very academic. And the editor who acquired it asked about that. And I asked my author, I'm like, why didn't we mention that? And he goes, it's really dry, it's boring, it's for people teaching like college classes. So that's why we didn't mention it. So there you go. And that's what we did. We just had 5 titles. If you have 3 books for competition, you're good. We went a little bit further and did 5. So, and then for My Feet Are Beautiful, once again, fiction is always harder because it's much more relative in how you interpret it. We had another opening just like the other one, 2 to 3 sentences. And then we had, this is the book that inspired her to write her book. So she did this one, and you see we have the bibliographic information and a little summary. Yeah. And then, of course, Eleanor and Park, because we both were inspired by Eleanor and Park. And then Looks. So we just had 3 titles. That's it. You don't have to write a thesis here. If anyone's ever written a PhD or a thesis, because I was in that party, it's not like the competitive analysis that's like 60 pages long. It's nothing like that. It's just a few titles that are similar in tone.